Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar entitled Digital Literacy, Navigating and Evaluating Online Library Resources. I'm Masaki Morisawa, based in Tokyo from Cengage Gale, Asia, and I'm very happy to be presenting to you today. Before I start the webinar, some housekeeping items. This is a webinar done on the Zoom webinar format, so you do not need to have microphones or your cameras. You can just listen to me and watch me present on the screen. And if you have any comments or questions or technical trouble or help needed during the course of this webinar, if you scroll your mouse, kind of move your mouse on your screen, you will see the Zoom tool panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And at the bottom of that panel, you will see a Q&A tool, which looks like two kind of balloons, speech balloons together. If you click on that tool, if you click on the Q&A tool, you'll be able to enter your question in text format. And I'll be monitoring this Q&A box or the chat box, whichever you prefer, during the course of this webinar. So you don't have to wait till the very end for to ask a question or a comment. Please feel free to enter your questions or comments at any time during this webinar. And this webinar is being recorded. So tomorrow, approximately at the same time, you will receive a link containing the recording, as well as today's slides in PDF format. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to start the webinar. So this is today's agenda. I chose a very big topic today, digital literacy. And of course, that means a lot of different things to many different people. I would like to start by kind of loosely defining what I mean here by digital literacy and some of the common challenges that we face, especially as educators or librarians, or even as students who are struggling with the concept or its implementation as well. And then I would like to walk you through some ways that library databases that publishers such as Gale publish can help students and educators with their digital literacy skills. And I will go through several categories of databases. I'll start with reference works, which are exemplified by our Gale eBooks platform. And then I'll move on to more general academic databases, such as our Gale OneFile line of products. And then I'll delve into some other areas like literary sources, exemplified by our Gale Literature databases. And finally, primary sources, exemplified by our Archives Unbound line of products. And then I'll finish with a conclusion and wrap up. And this whole webinar is supposed to end in 45 minutes. So thank you very much for your time and attention. So digital literacy, that's a very big term, and there are many different definitions out there on the web and in various literature. I kind of skimmed through a lot of that literature, and I found that there are various ways to define it. One way to define digital literacy is through hard skills. So that could be like the ability to use a computer or use a digital device, connect to the internet, use a keyboard and a mouse or a touchscreen interface. Or very shortly, those can be summarized as so-called tech skills. That's one aspect of digital literacy. However, as you can see here on the screen, most 2-year-old kids already know how to use an iPhone or a tablet. I can testify that my daughter, when she was just 2 years old, I handed her my mobile phone. It wasn't even a smartphone at that time, but she managed to turn the display of that phone everything into black and white. And it took me a full hour to figure out how to put that back into full color. And she was only 2 years old. And now today she's 12 years old, and arguably she knows more about using computers and changing various settings than I do today, even though I've been using these devices much longer than she has. So most young students require very little help on these hard skills, if any. And even if we teach these hard skills like how to use Excel or how to use Word or those devices, they can become quickly outdated. So by the time they graduate university and enter the workforce, the skills that they have been taught in school would no longer be of any practical use. So the hard skills part of digital literacy, although they are important, is not our focus today. Instead, my focus today will be on the more soft side of skills. And this is really neatly summarized in this paragraph that I quote from this book called Education Today: Issues, Policies, and Practices. And it mentions that most students score well at measures of technical capability, or in other words, hard skills, being able to operate a computer, and of digital citizenship in general. However, they tend to score much lower on other areas, particularly those pertaining to the ability to search for and locate information, and to use critical thinking and decision-making skills to evaluate that information. And these are the really true kind of transferable skills, the soft skills of digital literacy. These are the goals of any educator or any librarian or any student for that matter, the ideal that they want to achieve. And this will be the focus of today's webinar, the soft skills of digital literacy. However, it's much easier said than done. It's easy to say it's important for students to acquire the ability to search and locate information, to use critical thinking skills, blah, 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 than to actually implement that in an educational setting. And I think there are various challenges when we try to kind of implement that kind of soft skill education on digital literacy with today's students. And I kind of break them down some of the major challenges, and I identified 3 major challenges or obstacles in implementing a digital literacy education. The first challenge is very obvious. We live in an era of information overload. There is just limitless information on the open web at our fingertips, or some of our students of today don't even use their fingers. They might use voice input. They might call up their genie and ask for that information, and it will come to them. So there is limitless information out there on the web, and it is lightning fast execution. You can grab it and grab back that information in seconds or milliseconds, and it's so easy to do. And that leads us to the second challenge. There is a law of least effort. Just like water, when it flows, eventually it will find the shortest way to reach its final destination, which might be the sea or the lowest area of gravity there. Just like that, human beings, naturally, they would find the easiest means or easiest ways to achieve their means. And for many students and many people, that is the open web. Just go to Google or just go to Baidu and enter a search term. Or even easier, you can just go to your social network and see the various feeds and find out what's going on in the world. And that's the end of your effort sometimes. And the final challenge is, in this era of many kind of multiple values and really quickly changing world, there are no final right answers to any question. So it's not like you have a very hard set goal or an answer that you're striving for, and you can just guide your students or pupils to that correct answer and just give them a test and correct them on that answer. Digital literacy, by definition, is very, very soft, and it's not easily definable. So there's no clear-cut goal, and there is no right answer or correct answer to digital literacy. So that gives a lot of problems to its implementation as well. How do you measure this thing, or how do you decide that you have succeeded in acquiring the right answer? And about Gale ourselves, we have been in the publishing business for many years, more than half a century, and we have been publishing for libraries. And we have various library databases and resources that we have created for our educational community, such as ebooks or aggregated journal databases or subject-specific databases or even primary source databases. So we hope that our databases can help educators and librarians achieve those goals of digital literacies. And of course, the answer to that question, can library databases help achieve digital literacy, would be yes, but it's also a kind of a qualified yes. The short answer is yes, but there is a little bit more detail that we need to go through. It's not that straightforward. And why? First of all, we must acknowledge that we have limitations. We have created lots of library databases, and they are really, really useful things, but they cannot directly compete with Google or Wikipedia or a lot of those open web resources that are out there and so easily accessible, especially in terms of sheer quantity and coverage. There's just so much in the open web, and it's really, really lightning fast accessible. It's very, very easy. And the speed of updating is really, really phenomenal. Everything, something that happened today would already be appearing in Google or in Wikipedia, and we cannot compete with that speed. Even ease of use, although we think that our databases are amongst the most easiest to use in the industry, that's just within our industry. If we compare our databases to tools like Google or Series or all those other latest digital tools, we cannot really compete in terms of ease of use. We have to have users authenticate, for one thing, and then the purposes of our databases are pretty narrowly defined. It's not just anything. You can't ask anything in our library database. So the user has to arrive equipped with some sort of a right sort of expectation to use our databases efficiently. And that can be a kind of a challenge for the average user as well. And I would love to say that although we might not be able to compete with open web resources in quantity, speed, and ease of use, we still have the right answers, but not quite so. Neither we, the library publisher, can claim that we have the right answers to any kind of question in our databases, because there are no such things as right answers in this world. There are just many different viewpoints. But what we can say is we can provide a way to arrive at your own right answers and a better way to arrive at your own answer, your own correct answers to any question than relying on the open web. So the emphasis on digital literacy is not just saying that library databases are better than the stuff on the open web. That's not really persuasive, for one thing, and it doesn't really make sense. There are many, many great things about the open web, like the sheer quantity of stuff out there, the lightning fast speed of updating, the mass participation of thousands and billions of users in creating content and updating and commenting and liking things, and the ease of use. These are really, really great things. And we shouldn't, kind of devalue the open web that way. However, we should also make people aware that there are trade-offs for that ease of use and that quantity out there. For example, that sheer quantity can also contain uneven or fake content. The speed of updating might also contain unverified information or even rumors or even fake, intentionally fake rumors that are spread on the internet. Mass participation can also mean popularity-based rankings of searches or ad-based rankings or anonymity, general anonymity. You don't know who's writing the stuff that you see on the internet sometimes. And even the ease of use also implies hidden costs because it's a trade-off. You are actually giving out some of your personal information, and you have to cope with things like advertisements or unsolicited quotes or unsolicited approaches from all kinds of companies and information as a result of that free and easy experience. So in short, as the proverb says, there is no such thing as a free lunch. And this realization is actually the starting point of digital literacy education. So don't just tell your students that you can't use Wikipedia or you shouldn't use Google. Just use library databases, because that's not going to work. You need to explain what the trade-offs are. And it's a great place to start to actually demonstrate that using these free tools like Google. So, for example, if a student has an assignment about racism, for example, they would often go to the open web and they would just type in the keyword racism and start their research. And this is what they will typically find as a result. First of all, they would see some advertisements, because Google thrives on advertisements, and any paid ads would appear before any algorithm generated search results. There are dictionary definitions about racism, and usually near the top of the search results, they would find a Wikipedia article on racism. Now, Wikipedia is a great resource. I use it all the time, and I would be lying if I said Wikipedia is not a great resource. It's really, really great, but it has many limitations. And one of the limitations is that when you open a Wikipedia page on a really generic topic like racism, it can become very, very long. This is the whole screenshot of this racism page on Wikipedia. I had to split it into 5 strips to fit it into the screen. And you can see how long it is. It's a lot of information, and probably a lot of it is useful. But try to think, when was the last time you actually read a Wikipedia article from beginning to end? And especially a really long article like this on racism. You probably haven't. Most people just use Wikipedia to do quick checks, quick fact checks, in fact, and they don't really actually read the whole article because it's so difficult. On the other hand, you can do the same search on racism in a library database like Gale eBooks, and it will come up with various other types of information. And the great thing is, they would have, Gale eBooks would return all kinds of articles on racism, but they will be coming from different sources. So for example, you might see a racism overview article from the Encyclopedia of Race and Racism. Or you might see an article on racism from the Encyclopedia of Psychology. Or you might see an article on racism from the Encyclopedia of Globalization. Or an article on racism on an Encyclopedia of Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity. And each of these articles will be written under different contexts, and they will be all written by specialists in each field, and they will give you different takes or different viewpoints on that same topic, all written by specialists. You can compare these different multiple perspectives with that very, very long but single article on Wikipedia that is very, very difficult and confusing to read. And our articles are by publishers, and they are always written by clear authors and editors who are named and are often highly reputed as well. For example, this article on racism overview is written by a team of scholars that are each specialists in the field of racism and edited by an expert on racism, each from a reputable university. On the other hand, if you kind of look under the hood of that Wikipedia article and open the revision history, you would find people like Andy the Grump, the Sim Librarian, or the General Relative, or the illegitimate barrister. And these are, of course, all kinds of anonymous names. They are just nicknames of real people, but you don't know who they are and what qualifications they have about writing about this article. And another problem is coherence in Wikipedia. And this is an example of an interesting study about the coherence problem in Wikipedia, which basically says that because these articles go through so many revisions by so many hands and eyes, it often becomes unreadable and inaccessible to average readers. It becomes so difficult to read because it's not written by a single point of view. It's a kind of an amalgam of differing points of view and of a real compromise. And you might say, well, that's great. Gale ebooks might be great, but still it's difficult to get our students to actually read this material. They have challenges in actually reading English. Some of our students are not even first language speakers of English. How do we get them to use this content? Well, we have several different solutions for that. For instance, in Gale eBooks, you can filter your content by content level. So if your student is not very confident reading advanced language, English language articles, they can filter the articles by reading level, like level 1, 2, 3. And another great tool we have is the annotation tool that is built into all of these Gale databases. Whenever you're reading an article in Gale ebooks or in any of our databases for that matter, you can always kind of drag and drop any part of the text and create a highlight or an annotation. And you can even send that annotated text to your Google Drive or OneDrive. And some institutions have been using this feature very creatively to engage students in reading. For example, this is an example from a US high school that had a 10th grade English course, and they had an assignment where students were made to select 6 different articles from Gale databases. And they were supposed to highlight the 3 most important words within each chunk of information. So that chunk can be a chapter or it can be a paragraph, but they must highlight 3 of the most important words that they think are the most important within each chunk. And then they are made to use those 3 words in turn to paraphrase what each chunk was about. So this really helps to get students engaged in the reading process because it becomes an activity. And the other great thing is you can share this annotated text on Google Drive, where it becomes a Google document, which many other students can collectively edit or annotate using the Google interface. And that allows for even further collaboration opportunities within the school. So Gale eBooks, some key benefits compared to the open web is that it's a great place to start your research. You can get basic overviews on a topic, just like you can on Wikipedia. However, one key difference is it's more authoritative. It offers you multiple perspectives instead of one single long Wikipedia article, which is written by so many people and it's not even really coherent. It offers you multiple perspectives that you can read and compare. And they are coherently written by people with clear responsibilities and names and faces and titles and positions. So it's much more reliable and it's much more coherent and easier to understand. So Gale eBooks is really the place that I really recommend people to actually start their research so they can get understandings on the basic facts of a topic. And once you have a basic understanding on the topic, be it racism or something else, you can start expanding to different content types other than books. And a great place to do that will be one of our general academic databases like Gale Academic OneFile. So once you have that basic knowledge on the topic, now you can look into things like academic articles, news articles, magazine articles, reports, short videos, images, and much more. And much of this material that are contained in these academic databases are publisher-generated material that do not appear in Google or other free sources. And what a lot of educators and librarians really love about the way we display this information, for example, this is a search on racism in Gale Academic OneFile, is that we segregate these types of information. So we have different tabs and icons for each of those tabs for different types of information. So academic journals are segregated from magazine articles, and they're different from news articles or images or videos or book chapters. So search results are shown by content type, which kind of guides the user to see each of these types of material differently. And furthermore, we always include the publication title. These are filterable on the right-hand side, so they can see where this information is coming from. For example, an article on racism coming from the Journal of American Ethnic History will be probably different from an article on racism coming from the Chronicle of Higher Education. So that additional context really helps the student or the user to understand the context in which the item was first published. And this is the kind of information that is so difficult to find in Google until you actually open each article, but we show it to you even on the search results screen. Another common problem we get with, especially with beginner users, is that we, even within our limited scope of publisher databases, we give too many results on, especially on generic topics like racism. So sometimes users are overwhelmed. They're not sure which results are relevant to their interests or which results are even interesting to them. For those kind of users, or for any kind of users actually, we have a special tool that is called a topic finder. On any search result page, you can click the topic finder and it will automatically generate a visual map of the key topics that are appearing in your top 100 search results. So again, this is a topic finder result on the keyword search racism. And if you look at this topic heat map, you would find several interesting topics that are coming up here. And I might, for example, be interested in this cluster called COVID-19. And I might be wondering what COVID-19 has to do with racism. I can click on that and further see the other subdivisions within that COVID-19 cluster, or on the right-hand side, I can see the various articles that are relevant to COVID-19 in the racism search results. And I could find that there are issues such as racism being a factor on how more likely you are to get COVID-19 or to get sick by COVID-19, or racism as a result, appearing as a result, or discrimination appearing as a result of the virus originally coming from an Asian country, for example. And this will help you really find new ideas and topics and make new connections without having to look at all of the search results one by one. And when you open one of these articles, we also give you some help, especially if it's an academic article. Some of the terms that appear in the article might be difficult to some users. And if you look carefully at the screen, you would notice that some of these terms, these keywords within the article, are hyperlinked. This happens whenever an institution has a one-file subscription and one of our ebooks solutions or other solutions that are interlinkable with your one-file solution. So if you click on one of these hyperlinks, you would actually get a list of articles that are related to that particular keyword coming from a Gale ebook subscription. For example, if I click on that keyword stereotype, I might find articles on model minority coming from the International Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, which gives me an overview on that topic. So these hyperlinks provide further context to understand the highly academic article that I might be kind of struggling to understand. And you might have noticed that one file also contains things like images and videos and multimedia. And these are all ad-free, of course, and deepfake-free. They are not falsely generated videos. These are all reputable publishers' videos, and often very thought-provoking, such as this video on a racist attack that was caught on camera in 45 years ago in the United States. And the other great thing about these videos is for most of these videos, we even include the complete transcripts. So students can actually use the transcripts to do that annotation or collaboration work that I introduced in the Gale ebook section. And they can do it with a video content as well. And for the educator, all of these resources are easily integrated into LMSs. So this is an example of an LMS integration into the Canvas LMS. And educators can easily create assignments. They can create links to documents, and users such as students can simply click on the links without even having to go through the institutional authentication. They can go straight into the content via the LMS. So it's really makes it really easy for the students to access the content through their LMSs as well. And additionally, we make these resources in Gale OneFile also discoverable from Google Scholar. So for more advanced users who might be searching for academic articles on Google Scholar, they can click on these articles if it's an article that's available in Gale Academic OneFile and go directly to Gale Academic OneFile. If they haven't been authenticated already, they can just click on that Get Full Access link and authenticate through their institution and instantly get access to the full article as well. Okay, so Gale OneFile is a really, really great resource containing current academic and popular content aggregated from the world's top publishers. And the content type buckets make it easy for students to distinguish between different types of information. And multimedia, visual search like the topic finder that I showed to you, and the hyperlinks within the articles provide a really interactive experience for the user as well. Now, so far, we've talked about more current information that are things like ebooks and journal articles and periodicals. But what about more traditional literacy, literacy in the more traditional terms, like fiction works or literature in general? And I think this is still very, very much relevant to digital literacy, although it's not often discussed in the context of digital literacy. And I thought this particular article that I found on the web was a really, really great example to illustrate that. This is an African-American writer, and she wrote on her blog that she was asked by a white friend to explain, what is white privilege? I don't understand it as a white person. Can you explain to me? And she decided to be honest. And one of the examples she gave was really, really striking. In her freshman college tutorial, her group of 4 to 5 students was assigned to read Thoreau, Emerson, Malcolm X, Joseph Conrad, those great literary works. And when it was the week to discuss the autobiography of Malcolm X, one white boy boldly claimed he couldn't even get through it because he couldn't relate with the content. He thinks that he shouldn't be forced to read it. And she replies, probably in her own mind, that my whole life, I've had to read things that don't have anything to do with me or that I relate to, but I find a way anyway, because that's what learning is about. It's about trying to understand other people's perspectives. And that's a really, really great lesson. Literature has that power to really, really hold up a mirror up to nature, as Shakespeare said, and provide invaluable lessons on things like empathy or interpretation and expression. However, much of this material on literature is actually off limits from the open web. Even if it exists, it's very difficult to find on tools like Google. So Gale Literature is a great resource which provides all types of literary sources in a single platform. It's not just a database of novels and poems or literary works themselves, but there's a whole lot of information and articles and material about literary works, explaining what they are, what they mean, or analyzing their significance, or explaining the lives of the authors and creators themselves. So Within Gale Literature, just like within Gale OneFile, we also categorize the search results for easy navigation so students can differentiate between different types of works on literature, like literature criticism, biographies, topic and work overviews, reviews and news, etc., etc. And for example, from the topic overview sections, they can get an introductory article on contemporary American literary responses to institutional racism. And it even comes with a reading list of representative works. Or they can actually read literary works with some annotations, such as this is an excerpt from a play about Black literature. And you can start reading some of these poetic lines and try to understand what this literary work is trying to say. Or they can get access to tons of high quality literary criticism that have been written by many scholars that help explain and read between the lines of these important literary works. So Gale Literature provides many benefits to digital literacy scholars, digital literacy education. It helps explore how world literature has expressed the human condition, how that human condition has been interpreted, and what kind of influence literature has had on our perception of the world. It features contemporary, minority, and non-European authors, and we have been really trying hard in this, especially in recent years, to represent works that are outside the so-called Western canon, and that African-American literary criticism example that I showed to you earlier is one example of that recent effort. And it enables users to make a connection between current world issues like racism issues and these issues expressed in literature just by doing a keyword search on that topic. So that was Gale Literature. And that provides another angle to explore resources outside of the open web that are helpful in understanding the world. And there's another angle that I really want to emphasize. This is actually a timeline of world history that I took from Wikipedia. I had to kind of move it sideways because it wouldn't fit in the screen, but you can see everything that happened from the really prehistorical times all the way down to the present time. And the reason I put this here is to emphasize that our current information age, the so-called age that we are living in, and the era of the internet and Google itself has only existed for a tiny fraction of human history. So another limitation of the open web is that there seem to be so much resources out there, but actually most of that content was only generated in the last 10 or so years. So what the open web really lacks is chronological depth or historical depth. And this can be provided by primary sources. So a lot of the material that you can find on the web are usually secondary sources. They are interpretations or analyses about a topic, and usually they're created later than the event described. And usually, though not necessarily, these are modern materials. Whereas primary sources are first-hand accounts of a topic, and they're created in the same time frame as the event described. And usually, these are historical material. And a lot of that historical material is very hard to find on the open web. And another really great thing about primary sources is they are essential to original research and also to great grades as well. This is a really one of my favorite anecdotes. A professor was asked by one of his students, "How do I get an A+ for my paper in your class?" And the professor responded very simply, "Show me something that I didn't know." And the only way that you can show a professor like this, who is probably read or is familiar with all of that secondary resources about any given topic of his interest, is to go and dive into primary sources and find something there, because even a professor couldn't have seen all of the primary sources that are relevant to his or her research topic. And this is where things like Archives Unbound, which is a collection of more than 310 primary source collections from all over the world, actually, becomes very, very valuable. These are original documents sourced from major research libraries like the National Archives of the United States, the National Archives of the UK, or many other university archives. And it's also a great entry point product because each of these collections are relatively small and affordable. And it's a great entry point for libraries who are considering to add primary sources to their holdings. And it covers all kinds of subjects, including Asian history, US civil rights, global affairs. Almost everything is covered within Archives Unbound. So you can again do a search on a keyword like racism and come up with an article or a document like this. Like this one is an interesting document called The Black Book. And upon looking at it, it's actually a collection of quotations from various African or African American thinkers. And the whole point of this Black Book is, if you look at the introduction, it is clearly modeled on the Little Red Book of Mao Zedong. So it's kind of a representation of all kinds of quotes, and it kind of places the struggle of the Black person in a white world in the context of global oppression of various peoples in various societies. So it's a really different angle to look at in that racism keyword. Another example is from the Philippines. So this is an actual example is from the US Information Agency, which was an agency that was trying to improve American image, the image of Americans in various countries. So they did a lot of questionnaires in various countries, and this one is conducted in the Philippines. And it shows that Americans score rather poorly in this column F about race prejudice. And there are other interesting, lots of interesting articles and material in here. This one is particularly interesting because it's entitled Race Problems and Racial Disturbances. But if you look at it closely, this is more like a political problem. This was a struggle between Chinese landowners and Korean tenant farmers in Japanese occupied northeastern China during the 1930s. So it's not just a racial problem, but there are a lot of national and political tensions intertwined in this single article. So Archives Unbound contains these many 300 collections on various topics, and all of these are full text searchable and expands the scope of the material chronologically. And most importantly, it enables users to conduct original research using these sources. So, to kind of conclude and wrap up, I talked about the 3 challenges to digital literacy, which are limitless information, the law of least effort, no right answers in the end. And really, it's the importance of educating users on the limitations and potential pitfalls of free web resources. So it's impossible to totally prohibit users from using these resources, and they are great resources. Open web resources are great resources, but it's really important to educate them on the limitations and proposing to them alternatives in the forms of library databases, which provide multiple types of resources, resulting in multiple types of viewpoints for multiple time periods and different contexts that really enrich their point of view and their research experience. And these are the products that I discussed today and some of the key points that I raised during the course of these presentations. And if any of these are interesting to you, all of these are available for free trials from any institution. And by the way, in some regions, all 4 of these resources are actually packaged together in a package called Gale Research Complete. So if you might be interested in that, you could contact us for a free trial or an institutional trial. Just contact us at galeasia@cengage.com. So I hope that was helpful a bit. And thank you again for your attention and for your time today. Sorry, I spent the entire time talking. But if you have any questions or comments, please feel to enter them into the chat box or into the Q&A box. And before you leave this webinar, when you click exit the webinar, you will be shown a very short questionnaire. It won't take more than 5 minutes to complete. So I'll be very, very grateful if you could just spend a few minutes to complete that questionnaire after you leave this webinar today. So thank you very much again for your attention and time. And I hope to see you again in one of these spaces or in real time. Thank you so much.